Hello, 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 all you glorious Threads Radio listeners. I want to say thank you to Offbeat, Steppa, Vernon for introducing us. And we got a special one for you today. If you don't know already, we are here grabbing a quick half-hour interview with the man, the myth, the legend. He is a phenomenal writer, novelist, poetry, children's book writer. He's written fiction, done acting, TV.
Come on, you're embarrassing me now, man.
No. Look. I'm only an inch through what is a chunk of a biography. You've already heard him. Can we have a big round of applause in studio, please, for Benjamin Zephaniah? How are you feeling, man?
I'm okay. I'm nice and relaxed. Yeah.
It's good to have you here. If you don't know already, Benjamin Zephaniah and his band, the Revolutionary Minds, are going to be shelling down the cause for the first gig of their 5-date comeback tour. If you haven't already got tickets, well, it's tonight and it may already sold out. But you can catch him in Leeds, Bristol, I do believe, Norwich, of course, and the final one, I don't know, but details are on the website. Greenwich, yeah. Of course, wonderful Greenwich. So it's obviously been about a year and a half maybe since last gig. How was lockdown treating you, Benjamin?
Well, actually, it's a question I get asked a lot, and every time I get asked that question, I feel really guilty because I had a kind of good lockdown. I live in a nice part of the country. I grow my own vegetables. I didn't have to go to a supermarket, so I wasn't worried about that kind of connection with the virus. I stayed at home. I've got a nice gym at home. I wrote a novel, which instantly became a bestseller.
That's called The Windrush Children.
And then I had another book published based on a poem that I wrote years ago. So personally, I had a very good lockdown. But I say that with kind of a tinge of guilt because, I almost lost my sister during lockdown with the virus. A couple of my friends, Delroy Washington, the reggae singer, Ty, the rapper, Toots Hibbett from Toots and the Maytals, we lost them all, So it's been okay for me personally, but I've got friends and families who it hasn't been so good for.
I think it's an important thing to say that for many musicians and artists, before the lockdown hit, a lot of people were running 110 miles an hour. Yes. We're going so hard, and different people had different interactions with lockdown. Some people needed that time to actually decompress and to stop,
I know some people who had a lot of mental health problems when lockdown happened because they felt isolated, they felt that they needed to get out and they were confined into a small space. Then I know some people who felt it was good for their mental health. It was good to kind of stop and reset, because the world was going crazy. I don't want to get too heavy, but it's... People keep going on about going back to normal. I don't want to go back to normal. Normal got us here. Normal messed us up really badly, And I'm not going to go on and say that, I was right, we were right. But people like me, vegans like us, we said if you mess with animals, not if we do it, when we do it, all the time, viruses jump from them to us, right? So we told you so about that. Look what's happening with the environment now. Somehow, scientists have just discovered that we're messing the environment up. Well, I've been talking about that since the 70s, right?
Yeah.
Look what's happening in Afghanistan. We said when we go in there, you'll never win. You'll never win. Now, the British and the Americans have had to come out with their tails behind them because war is not the answer. There is no way to peace, Peace is the way. And unless you learn that, we're going to have constant wars. They're not learning. That's why I don't want to go back to normal. And that's the job of us musicians and poets, to speak a truth, which politicians and a lot of so-called public intellectuals just won't speak. But we have to speak that truth. The problem with the system right now is it makes a lot of money for a very small amount of people while everybody else is suffering. I'm not preaching, I haven't got an ideal system in my bag. But I'm just saying that we have to find another way.
So, I like how by the way, I broadly agree with everything you said there in terms of we can't go back, we have to go forward, and we also can't go back to normal. Normal is the issue that got us to where we are, right? But just to bring in a couple of things that you said. So you're talking about extractive economies. So essentially, governments, systems, corporations that treat the natural world as a resource for us to just, commodify and to use. This is part of classic European colonialism and imperialism. And what you say about it being the artist's role to speak out, where, maybe politicians aren't, where public intellectuals aren't. I just want to ask you about how you've managed to, let me ask it this way. How have you kept your integrity as a vehement anti-imperialist and a political citizen across your work? Because you've been going, I'm not going to big you up here, but you've been going for a long time. You've made some incredible moves and you've done such wonderful work that really is grounded in the world, and people connect with it so strongly because there is such integrity there. How have you managed to keep that integrity across your career and so many art forms as well?
I think it's about really being true to yourself and not aligning yourself to any trend or any political party, admitting when you get it wrong. I'm forever talking about the mistakes I made when I was young and what got me into prison and all that stuff. And, my family always say, stop talking about that stuff, But it's what made me, and you learn by your mistakes. It's not about being perfect. It's about trying to do the least harm and the most good. And I think people like truth, even if they disagree with you. I'd be a fool to think that everybody in my concert agrees with everything I say. But I think everybody in the concert will say, you know what, at least he's getting up and he's saying it. And there's something at the root of, I don't want to sound pompous, but my philosophy, which has not changed. Basically, I love mankind, I love the planet, and I have this very basic belief that black and white and Asian can live together. I have this very basic belief that we could live for as long as the earth can sustain us if we learn to live with the earth rather than just taking from it. All this stuff from it is kind of stays the same. These are kind of self-evident truths. And I think I'm an anarchist, and I find myself sometimes in positions where people ask me to talk about anarchism, and I could talk about anarchist philosophy and stuff like that, but I talk about very basic things. I say we can do this for ourselves.
Yeah.
We can have our own spirituality. We can have our own economy. And people go, yeah, that makes sense. But if I talk about, big philosophers, they can scratch their heads and go, we don't quite know what you mean.
Dropping some 18th century French philosopher who's written in a phenomenal book. That's not how people understand politics often.
People understand how it's going to affect their life and what they can do to make things better for us. Yeah.
And so let's bring that to your poetry then. Your poetry has such utility, man. For anybody who doesn't know me listening or here, my name is The Repeat Beat Poet. I'm a hip-hop poet and MC. I didn't introduce myself earlier because I am sitting in the shadow of one of the many people who inspired me to start writing, to be doing performance poetry in the UK. And if you're doing poetry in the UK, then not only are you under the shadow of Benjamin Zephaniah, you're within his sphere of influence. And what I want to say to you is there's been such an uptick in people coming back to poetry in the past kind of 15, I want to say, odd years within the UK. So this is after the time of Kay Tempest and Holly McNish and Scroobius Pip and Cat Francois and these types of poets. As an elder in the scene, what is it, do you think, about your poetry that keeps people interested? Because people got short attention spans these days, man, and yet you're always there, so solid.
Yes, I don't know what the answer is to that, because it's not manufactured. I don't sit there and think, well, how am I going to reinvent myself? I look at the world and feel that I should comment on things, and I'm very realistic. I'm not one of these people. I'm 63 years old now, right?
Don't look a day over 40, mate.
I'm an old man, but I notice that a lot of people, I find it very difficult to hang out with 60-year-olds because they just start complaining about young people all the time. I just find the music that they listen to, and I go, well, I'm listening to that. I was with a friend of mine the other day, before lockdown, and I was in my car just before a concert, and I played him a track of music that I I'd just done in the studio, and he burst into tears. I mean, this big Rasta man, he just burst into tears. I said, what's the problem? He said, this music, it moves you so much, and you're so passionate about it. And I went, yeah, so what? And he went, well, this is the music my children listen to, and I tell them not to listen to it. You see? So there's something about, if I go in the public space and say that I don't like black people, right, that's bad, obviously. And if I say I don't like gays, or I don't like whites, or I don't like whatever, that's all bad. We know that, right? But we can go and say I don't like children, and people think it's funny. You know, comedians do lots of jokes about not liking their children, and people seriously will say, I hate children, I'm not going to have children. It's up to them if they don't want children. But the idea that you cannot like children, you were once a child, we can't all be black, we can't all be white, we can't all be gay, we can't all be straight, but we were all once kids. And it's so easy to forget your childhood. And what happens with a lot of us is that, it may happen to you, I'm not being negative now, I'm just saying that we all tend to remember the music of our youth as we get older, and we kind of think that's it, you know, and we shouldn't really, you know. But I meet guys when I say guys, I mean guys and girls of my age, and they're into their reggae and their dub, and they think everything else is selling out. And I say no. I mean, I had the pleasure of meeting Bob Marley, and Bob Marley looked at reggae and he said, I want to push it forward. I want to bring songwriting into dub, when it wasn't really about the craft of songwriting, and he brought that to it. And whether we like it or not, he said, I wanted to hear it on reggae. So you get higher register stuff rather than the heavier dub stuff, you know. People, the way that music develops is that people learn from the past and bring something new to it, you know.
Absolutely.
And once you start saying, well, my music is, you know, I'm into punk, or I'm into dub, or I'm into glam rock or something, it's just showing your age. You know?
I think it's something about the Puritans, or like the people who are purists with their music and go, only this period, only this time, and it's almost like you calcify it. You end up like treating it as a statue as opposed to like plasticine sculpture, something that can be made better and made new, and something that can grow, you know.
And the interesting thing is, most good musicians won't say that,
yeah,
because they know that, you know, you get like heavy rock musicians that listen to classical music or whatever. They know that music comes in all shapes and sizes and all kind of influences. But the thing I really want to say about poetry is that spoken word poetry, I'm a 63-year-old professor now of poetry, right? I mean, I teach it now, right? And one of the things I teach is that what me and Linton Kwesi Johnson and Jean Breeze and Holly McNeish and all these people do, and you, is not new spoken word. It's actually the first art form. Before we did anything, before we played any drums or anything like that, we were telling each other stories, and then we started embellishing it.
It's word, sound, power.
Yes, and then putting rhyme in it and doing all kinds of things. And I think the reason why we've survived, and okay, me and a handful of other people started a new wave of spoken word in Britain. And I think the reason why it survived so well is that we speak a truth. It's very personal. You probably, before you were born, there was a time when manufactured bands started happening.
Oh yeah.
And this record company and publisher tried to manufacture a poet, and I won't call his name, and he knows what he went through, but it completely failed. Because a poetry audience, they don't care what you dress like. They don't care what words can you say to move me.
The content of your character.
And there was even a movement of naked poetry once.
Yeah.
People come on stage naked and doing poetry, and people just went, "We're not interested in your body. What have you got to say to move us?" And as long as poets keep speaking truth, people will need poetry, and more importantly, well, just as important, I should say, music needs poetry. Some of the best music comes from poetry. Even Blur, those cats used to listen to Blake and people like that, you know, Bob Dylan, Bob Marley, listen to poetry. You can name loads of musicians who get their inspiration from poetry because they know the power of the spoken word. And in some languages, there's the word for song and poetry is the same song. A song in lots of languages is just it's a song poem, I beg your pardon. It's just a poem that you sing. That's how it started.
I think that's a really important thing to like keep in mind when we actually read poetry and listen to music. So I read a lot of poetry in my head, And every time I do that, I'm like, that's probably not, I need to verbalize this. I need to bring this out into the world. I think it's important because similarly to how in many languages songs are incredibly close to poems or the same,
Yes, yeah.
they're also phenomenally close to like the language of spells and spell casting and
spirituality and all
exactly.
kinds of things. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you a question about because you mentioned Gene Binter Breeze, obviously passed away. I want to say rest in peace to Gene. I want to talk a bit about sound system culture. And the importance of sound system culture on your poetry and on obviously dub poetry in general, thinking about people like Gene and Linton, obviously.
Well, that's where it started, you know. I used to be on sounds in Birmingham, Quaker City, Christopher, Mafia Tone Hi-Fi, you know, and I just used to toast on those sound systems. And the thing that I noticed about myself and the other people around us, we were all toasting as if we were in Jamaica. Right, you know. Literally, we say, you know, we got on Emmanuel Road, we got on a Constant Spring, and I'm thinking, I'm in Handworth, I'm just walking down Sower Road. You know what I mean? Like, and we're just doing all this stuff. And then I said, right, I'm going to start toasting about Birmingham, what was going on in Birmingham. And because I always had an interest in poetry, loved poetry, since I started using language, I began to slow it down and just give it more meaning. And I could get away with it sometimes. But the thing for me was, in the sound system dances, in the late 70s, the whole of England would have power cuts, electric power cuts. And you'd have a sound system dance in North Birmingham, and there'd be a power cut. And everybody would run to South Birmingham because there was power there, to a blues, right? But I would say, no, stay here, I'll entertain you. You know what I mean? Because I got a cut in the bar money too, right? Right?
So I said, right,
I'm going to entertain you. And I used to do my poetry. And I almost used to do a bit of cabaret as well, because I used to do like impersonations. I used to do a Mick Jagger impersonation and a Bob Marley impersonation, which was like really cool.
I'm not going to ask you to give us the impersonation.
I'm not going to do it, and that's hard, because those cats have come out to smoke a spliff, to whine in the corner, you know. So to keep them there was really, once you know you can do a gig there. When I got on stage in London, I thought, this is easy.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? When I got in front of the punks, I thought, this is easy.
They're paying attention, they're actually here to see me.
Yeah. So, but sound system culture is really important because it teaches you how music can literally move your body, bass that you feel. I think Don Letts wrote an article a few years ago saying that, and I think there was some truth in it, there's a generation of people that have never felt bass.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They just hear it in earphones and stuff like that. But being next to a speaker box that is bigger than you, right? That's homemade. It's not made in a factory somewhere.
Shakes your entire body in a frequency which is right there attuned to the way your body actually feels.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's nothing like that.
There is nothing like
it.
it.
That's spiritual, that's sexual, that's everything in one, you know what I mean? It's like,
I think what you were saying is interesting, to talk about a generation of people that haven't had the same experience of alternative live music or countercultural live music. So I'm talking after the 80s and the kind of after the like second summer of love, like the acid season, after the 90s, you have this big decline in independent parties and free parties. The culture kind of falls away due to many things, but there were many legislations, public order legislations, that specifically legislated against that type of countercultural, hard to commercialize, free party movement, hall parties. All of these things were kind of cut away, right? And so I want to say now, as we move into 2021, with the type of authoritarian government that we're facing, the type of legislation they're pushing towards us that similarly encroaches upon rights, including protest, right? Why do you think, or maybe could you speak to the importance of poetry and music as protest in a UK context?
Well, I think it's important. That's why I'm still doing it. It's a bit of a lonely place. And I'm fortunate in that I have lots of outlets. So, fortunately, I mean, I know some very revolutionary poets and musicians who say they struggle because they got no money, right? So they got to do some stuff for the money. Now, fortunately, I don't have to do that. I mean, I'm not saying I'm a millionaire, but you know, I have a salary from my university, and I'm established, and I do a lot of things which are kind of in the mainstream. You know, I mean, I've just finished doing children's BBC, for example. You know, in the cupboard, but I do that stuff because I want to reach kids as well. It is really, really important because poets and musicians speak to people in a way that politicians don't. And sometimes it can get difficult. Sometimes it can feel like there's no way out. Sometimes the state can kind of really be oppressive. You're not being put in prison, but you know, your movements are controlled. The ability to protest is controlled. All these things are controlled. I don't really have a kind of... The answer that I'm going to give to this is not a scientific one. It's not one I've done any studies on or surveys on, anything like that, right? But I just believe in the victory of good over evil. You know, capitalism will eat itself. That's no reason to sit back and do nothing, right? I don't know who said that. It's probably Karl Marx or somebody.
Mate,
but
the
I believe
capitalists
so.
themselves say it.
Yes, that's true, actually, yeah. The idea of perpetual growth is just rubbish anyway, right? There's going to come a time when we understand value more than price, you know, true value. The problem is that we are, when I talk about this generation, I mean all of us, me and you and all the people here in this room, we are kind of an impatient generation because we want change in our lifetime. The truth of the matter is, a lot of the people, especially the women, and also the men, obviously, that have made change in this world, didn't make it in their lifetime. You know, they died before they saw the fruits of their labour. So we have to remember that. Otherwise, I'm telling you, youth man, right? I'm telling you, right? I've seen a lot of people who haven't been able to grasp that idea and literally have cracked up mentally because they think, what is all my work for? And they get to 50 and 60 and they literally have breakdowns because they're frustrated because they're not seeing the change in their lifetime. And I'm trying to say to them, but your children will change, you know, other people will change. So don't give up, you know, have faith in humanity. People sometimes, as we've seen with Trumpism and popularism and all kinds of things, can get seduced. But in the end, good will overcome evil. And, you know, that's almost written in every religion, you know, although I'm not a religious person, right? And in every philosophy that's grounded in people, they know that in the end, good will overcome evil. Otherwise, they don't survive. They crack up.
And what a message to end this all too brief interview on. Good will triumph over evil.
Well, it has to, you know, we have to believe in ourselves.
And I also think that people coming together and fighting for that change, like you say, it's the only thing that has changed the world. So many of the people, we might not see change in our lifetimes, but that is no reason not to fight, no reason not to come together and to, you know, express our dissent, to protest, to fight for a better world, and to fight for a new way of the world, a way that values people over profit, and a way that values each other over, you know, the 0.001%, the owning class who pretend they can rule the world as opposed to being part of the world.
What I like about you is you say it much better than me.
See, that right there is going on all of my posters. I want to say thank you to everybody listening to Threads Radio. We do have
Before we finish, one really important question.
Before we finish, one last question from Vernon.
Are there any tickets left for this evening?
I got no idea.
I think
I'm
there's
not
some
sending
tickets
them, not in my
left.
pocket. I ain't got any.
I'm just going to play a tune for you.
Oh, I really don't know.
Wind down.
Wonderful. I think we're going to have one track to wind out. Thank you to Vernon. Thank you to the iconic Benjamin Zephaniah.
Peace.
My name has been the Repeat Beat Poet. You're listening to Threads Radio. Peace and love and unity to one and all.
Yeah.
Go, 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 go.